Welcome everyone to a special edition of Elevate Live. My name is Ranger Suleiman and I'm going to be your host today. We have an incredible show. I am so excited to welcome our audience and have this super important conversation. At Elevate, our mission is to unite the world's innovators to solve society's greatest challenges. And I can't think of a greater challenge than COVID and how it has changed everything, how we live, how we work. And it's important to be able to connect with thought leaders, business leaders, to get the information, the data, the facts you need so that you can help bring your business forward. And so today I'm super excited to welcome one of my favorite leaders. He is an icon in the world of business and technology. IBM President Jim Whitehurst is with us today. Today, our conversation, we're going to be exploring the open organization and how the hybrid cloud and AI technology are maximizing flexibility, resilience, and innovation at companies around the world. I also would love to encourage everyone to join the conversation. We want to make this a dialogue. Join the conversation. We are monitoring all social platforms using the hashtag #ElevateLive. So please share your comments and feedback. Join in the conversation. Again, I'm here. I'm excited to welcome Jim Whitehurst to the show. Jim is the president of IBM, and he is responsible for the IBM Cloud and Cognitive Software Organization and the overall corporate strategy of the business. Previous, Jim was the CEO of Red Hat, led it for many, many years, took it from an important, growing, scaling business to become a global leader, and led Red Hat's acquisition by IBM for, you ready for this? A $34 billion acquisition. It was the largest acquisition in IBM's 110-year history and completely transformed their business. And Jim is also a published author. In 2015, he published his book in partnership with the Harvard Business Review Press entitled The Open Organization, Igniting Passion and Performance, showing how open principles of management can help organizations navigate and succeed in a fast-paced, connected era. But what I love most about Jim is his passion for people and culture. Many of you who've followed Red Hat know how transformative, how desirable. It was recognized as a top employer for many, many years. And we know that doesn't happen without having inspired leadership right from the top. Jim, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to have a chance to be here with you.
Great.
Plus, I have to say that was probably the best introduction I've ever gotten, so thank you. Hope this is recorded. I'll have to send it to my mother.
Definitely. Listen, I did a little bit of digging and I'm like, I could have gone on. I could have talked about what you did at Delta, but I thought, let's focus on your tech world background. But I'm happy to do it and I'm honored that you're with us today. And so let's talk about this. We're talking about the global pandemic has changed everything, right? The new rules of business, work, life are all being written in real time. And as we get more vaccines and the world hopefully returns back to a new normal, I think the decisions that are being made today in business are going to be long-lived for the decades to come. And that's why it's so important to make sure that you're making those right decisions. But before we get into that, Jim, let me just check in with you first of all. How are you doing personally, professionally? How has COVID been for you and your family?
You know, I'm obviously one of the very, very lucky ones where I have an office myself and have been able to weather it quite well. I have twins. They just started college. They both got to go there live. And so got to spend some time at home with them. So as I know, it's a terrible tragedy as it's been, I've been one of the very fortunate people who've been able to, weather it better than most. I hope you have too.
No, listen, I agree. I feel very, very privileged as well too. They're, again, a very difficult time, but we're all trying to do our part to help all of us move forward with this. So let's put on our tech hats. Let's talk about digital transformation. I mean, we've been talking about digital transformation for, like 10, 20 years. But COVID has been probably the greatest accelerant of digital transformation and all things digital, e-commerce and whatnot. And companies of all sizes are dramatically doubling down, increasing their efforts to modernize their business, be digitally transformed. And again, we want to make sure that they're making the right informed decisions today so that those decisions will help grow and bring prosperity to those businesses for the years and decades to come. Let's talk a little bit about IBM specifically, because you guys are at the forefront of this and the radical transformation even your own organization has seen in the last 10 years following the acquisition of Red Hat. As I mentioned, it was the largest acquisition in IBM's history, $34 billion. And then they also spun off NewCo, which was another $19 billion managed infrastructure project. Talk to me about what IBM is doing today. How are you helping companies? How are you accelerating digital transformation? Jim.
Yeah, so let me talk about what we at least think of as the problem enterprises have now, or the opportunity enterprises have now with technology, and how that leads into kind of what we are doing as IBM. The incredible thing for me, obviously being relatively new to IBM, coming in with the acquisition of Red Hat, is it is a company willing to really radically change what we do to meet what we see as the enterprise needs in technology at the time. So, if you rewind just a little bit of quick context, 50 years ago, IBM did everything. We made our own hard drives, we made our own networking gear, right? Made our own computers because there wasn't an ecosystem. And so we did it all and delivered solutions. We then got to the kind of late 90s, early 2000s, and this was the era of best of breed software. So you started getting, software packages, SAP, and all these other packages. And then on the hardware side, you had client server. So you had all this complexity on hardware and all this complexity in software, and people wanted to implement, ERP systems and CRM systems and a lot of back office function. So IBM at that time, we sold a lot of businesses, but we also built the largest software franchise around middleware to glue all these pieces together. And we built a consulting business to implement, ERP systems and otherwise. And we built a managed service business that we would run it for you because, CEOs at the time didn't think of technology as competitive advantage. And so we built a portfolio to meet enterprise needs at the time. Well, if we fast forward to where we are today, everyone, and this is kind of the core of digital transformation, almost all businesses see technology as core to their competitive advantage. It's not about automating the back office now. It's about core to competitive advantage. And that advantage is all about how do you consume innovation at a faster pace to drive your own pace of innovation. And frankly, you're doing it in a world of, you call it homogeneous infrastructure. So the whole idea is you're getting rid of the complexity and putting in cloud infrastructure. So for IBM, we see that set of issues. So enterprises wanting to move faster, ingest innovation faster, and we see a change in computing architectures to simplicity. So in order to be able to consume innovation, we are convinced you need to have a hybrid cloud first strategy. So how do you consume innovation from any cloud in a safe, secure, reliable way, all the way to your 5G core, all the way out to the edge? And then importantly, it's no longer about IBM doing it for you. Like we used to be very proud we're a solutions company, we'll do it for you. It's now we'll do it with you, right? So building that set of the cultural transformation we're going through to make sure that we are working with our clients to build their own capability to innovate. So the NewCo sales, basically the managed service business, which is managing that complexity, it's still really important, but it's not about where enterprises are going with innovation. So we're spinning that off. The acquisition of Red Hat was to bring in the platform to say, hey, you can have one common platform that runs on Amazon and Google and AWS and even on your mainframe. And so you can now have a cloud native infrastructure that runs everywhere in order to be able to consume innovation at a faster pace. So we are all about building a portfolio to help enterprises consume innovation from a myriad of sources in a safe, secure, reliable way, starting where they are and where their data is. And so that's what the core of the changes in the portfolio and where we're going with the culture and our strategy going forward.
Yeah, listen, it's great to see IBM, one of my favorite companies, one of the OG, tech companies of our time, continually to innovate, continually iterate, and continually stay relevant in helping businesses move forward. But let's talk about the cloud. We've been talking about the cloud and how it's going to change everything. And it does have a lot of potential. But you've gone on record and saying, the promise of cloud computing has largely gone unfulfilled. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, if you just look at the data, over 80% of applications and data have not moved to the cloud, right? So clearly there's, without a doubt, cloud architectures and the cloud ways of working and, cloud native infrastructures allow you to innovate faster. So why have, 20% or less of workloads actually moved there? And the problem is, you think about what clouds are, I don't mean this in a negative way, but there's to some extent a byproduct of a set of Web 2.0 companies saying, hey, here's how we operate. This would be great. You can innovate faster using this. So it's almost bringing a tool that is incredibly powerful, but it's not tailored for traditional enterprise needs. So, for instance, most enterprises have, systems of record where the data is tied to the application logic. So it's great to say, hey, if I had a totally separate architecture and if my applications were all cloud native, cloud would be great. But no company is actually there. And so trying to take a more holistic approach allows you, when we've done study after study, says it generates about 2.5 times as much value. And part of that starts off saying, don't assume everything on premise is legacy and I'm going to go do some new cool things out on the cloud. That's how you get to like 20% of your applications get moved to the cloud and you can't go any further because the rest of your applications aren't set up to do that. So we start off saying, look, cloud's holistic. How do you think about an architecture that spans across your own data centers to multiple public clouds so you can consume innovation, but also leverage the power of that kind of new computing model in your own data center. I use one quick example of that. I'll take banks, for instance, their systems of record are on the mainframe, which means the data's on the mainframe. Well, everybody talks about, big data and AI. Well, how do you actually do that on your data if it's on the mainframe? And you can try to take it off and move it onto a cloud, but now you got all the cost of moving it. You have the security concerns. Now with a common platform, the same platform, cloud native Kubernetes that runs on Amazon can run on your mainframe too. So now at night, you can just run those AI ML workloads on your mainframe where your data is, and or power or you say, I want to run that at a local branch office. So as soon as you say I have an infrastructure that runs anywhere, you don't get so tethered to saying, hey, cloud's great, but if I could have to go to someone else's data center, to do that, that becomes limiting. So how do you bring cloud to all of your deployment models? That's what we mean by hybrid cloud and what we're driving forward. And as we do that, it becomes much, much easier to consume cloud because it doesn't get into, well, I got to change out my computing architectures. It becomes a platform that runs across your computing architectures.
Got it. I was surprised to hear that only 20% of business applications are on the cloud. So clearly there's friction, as you gave the example of banks and saying, no, we want the data right here. So interesting. So the hybrid cloud is really that way of allowing customers to keep the data where they feel safe, but still getting many of the benefits that cloud technology, AI, big data, all that you discussed, the benefits of that. What other points of friction do you see? Like, what are other customers telling you of why they haven't made this switch? What else is sort of roadblocking them?
Well, a couple of the other big things. So one is just simply dollars. So you got a budget of dollars, and you can spend that taking your existing application and making it cloud native to move to the cloud. And that's great, but you spend a lot of money, you've added no business functionality. Most CIOs have a budget and they have to generate a feature velocity. So how you think about when and how to modernize a set of applications to get them cloud enabled versus building new applications to drive the feature velocity your business needs is a tough trade-off. And again, this idea of, well, if you can bring a cloud native application platform internally, your ability to move applications becomes much, much easier because you don't have to necessarily have them broken apart. You don't have to have them totally stateless and a lot of the other issues that are required on a cloud. So one thing, making it easier to avail yourself of the power of cloud by making the platforms enabled to handle more traditional applications as well as run on premise, I think is a key part of that. You then get all the security and regulatory issues associated with when and how you're thinking about moving applications. And then finally, honestly, what we hear a lot is enterprises saying, I love the power of cloud, but I need a partner to work with me. And
Mm,
the number of times that I've heard, hey, we're trying to run this, it didn't work right, and we're trying to figure it out. Well, where's my partner on the other side to help me do that? And I think that's where a partner like IBM, where we see ourselves as deeply involved with our client's success. It doesn't matter if an application is not running, if it's our platform or whether it's the application logic. We're there to help our clients solve that problem. And I think a lot of the newer technology players were like, here's my platform, it's self-service, use it, you figure it out. And there is some power to that in the flexibility, but I think that idea of a more shared kind of responsibility model and feeling like you have a partner that's sharing, whether it's a security and reliability, whether it's performance, that you have a partner that's in it with you, not just providing you the technology, but in it with you for your success, is key. And I think that is another blocker for certainly senior IT people saying, do I really want to trust my business to a platform if that platform doesn't feel equally responsible for reliability, security, application performance, et cetera.
yeah, no, that makes sense. So we know that the ultimate goal of digital transformation is to really be able to access, the insight and innovation from the data, right? Like with all of your data on the cloud or hybrid cloud, really there's some great information you can gather to make better business decisions. Talk to me about, we talked about some of the companies that have made the move. Who's doing this right? What company do you look to saying, you know what, they've really figured it out? If you're comfortable, I'd love you to share some specific examples of organizations.
Yeah, well, so I will. But let me start with just a couple of. I think the biggest problem, I think a lot of people look at some of the modern companies or the Web 2.0 companies and say, "Wow, look how well they're able to do data. Why can't I do that?" And I think you have to start off and recognize most enterprises have an application portfolio that was built back when the data and the application logic were linked together. So your data is in your application, and so recognizing that you have to therefore kind of build a roadmap of, okay, well, how do I tear those apart? How do I think about governance? How do I think about cleansing that data? Because again, you're starting at a different place in most traditional companies. And so we really, really focused hard on areas like, modernization, which is around data cleaning, data governance, how you kind of pull those pieces apart. And then obviously we have, the AI to do prediction and automation and that set of things. I just take an example, CIBC in Canada, big user of Watson AI Assistant. And it's literally using the power of that to help clients either online or mobile banking to, pay bills, transfer funds, do pay credit cards, even connecting to financial experts. And so the key with those technologies is to back up and say, okay, I have a set of kind of core data. I have a set of customer pathways. How do I bring those pieces together in an effective way? And so, I think that many companies will start off saying, well, I have all this data, Shazam, where my insight's going to come from. We generally find it works better, like in this example, to say, well, what are a set of customer pathways? And let me start to say, okay, how do I make sure I have the right data sets and then the right AI capabilities to kind of build kind of an intelligent set of workflows on top of that? And I think clients who start that way, you get more facile with it, and then it gets easier to add data, more workflows, more insight, and kind of build it in an iterative fashion that way. I think it's a little bit right now they're in vogue to say, I'm going to create this massive data lake and do this work on it. It generally starts off better to say, let me pick some specific workflows, let me automate and infuse AI and insight into those things and build up from there.
Got it. CIBC is, obviously very close to near and dear to us. We think they're doing wonderful, innovative things. So it's nice for you to sort of use that as the example. But let's talk a little bit about, cybersecurity, because I often hear that a lot. We have Claudette McGowan, who's the Global Executive Officer at TD, on our next roundtable, our next live next month on April 20th with IBM's own Chris Bontemp. And she always puts a bug in my ear about cybersecurity. Every 32 seconds, there's a cybersecurity threat. She's also on the board of Elevate, so I get a lot of access to Claudette. Talk to me about how CIOs and just generally, how should we be thinking about cybersecurity in a world where all of the data is either on the cloud or hybrid cloud or linked?
Well, I think that's one place to start, which is thinking really, really hard about accessibility and self-service relative to security. So, recognize, the average cybersecurity breach isn't spies coming in through the skylights. It's, somebody checking the million kind of windows to find one that's unlocked and, kind of sneak in. And so the broader your surface area and the more variety you have, the more likelihood you're going to have that a window gets metaphorically left unlocked. And so part of our strategy is, how do you have a common platform so you can have a common security model that runs everywhere? So yeah, you want to run this functionality on AWS and this on Google and this on IBM Cloud. Okay, great. But can you have a common infrastructure, a common security model, common visibility across those things, is a key piece of what we look to offer. I think another key piece is really, really, really then understanding what the relative security controls are that you can avail yourself of. So there are going to be some workloads where, confidential computing gets to be really important. We try to take a lead in that. And so it's basically saying your data is encrypted at rest, in movement, and even when computing is happening on that data. I think another area that we've been on the forefront that's really important is, just because quantum computers aren't existing at scale out in the wild today doesn't mean that you don't have to worry about quantum safe encryption. And so most of our digital keys, I think most of you know, will be breakable with quantum computers. So a breach today, stealing your data today, even if it's encrypted, probably means that in whatever it is, 5 years ish, that data can be unencrypted by quantum computers that are likely to be available at the time. So you need to be thinking about quantum safe security today, because breaches today will ultimately be impacted by that. So we try to drive a lot of feature set around that. So, multiple levels around thinking about security. But I do think the biggest issue with security, as it relates to cloud and a faster pace of innovation, is obviously faster pace of innovation requires things moving more quickly and greater self-service to allow experimentation and trial. And all of those things just increase the surface area of potential attack vector. And so really trying to balance that, saying, well, we want our developers to be able to move at pace, but let's pick a platform, not 5 platforms on which to do that, right? So you're not necessarily cutting off choice the developer has in terms of the tools they can use, but not saying, I'm going to build a model for Amazon and one for Azure and one for Google and one for IBM Cloud and one for on-premise, and saying, now I got to figure out 5 different models and how I'm going to secure that and have visibility, et cetera. I think it is critical, because that really is going to be such a key part of the next decade for every CIO.
Got it. Let's change gears a little bit and talk about people and culture. You, from what I've read and seen, have built an incredible culture at Red Hat during your tenure as CEO. Describe me a little bit about some of the magic and the things that you learned at Red Hat, and then how does that translate into IBM, a 110-year-old company, very much more established, and what role are you playing in IBM in shaping its culture?
Sure. So let me talk, I'm going to reverse the answer to those questions. So let me first talk a little bit about what I see in IBM and then what I'm doing about it, because that gets into kind of what I've learned. So, it's been fascinating to join IBM, because I'm very, very proud of Red Hat's culture and what we built. And it really is focused on innovation, open source ecosystem in a really, really, really powerful way. The thing that's been most fascinating to me about IBM is IBM has 2 cultural elements that I just love. One is an extraordinarily deep kind of culture around client success. And I know that sounds like, well, that doesn't everybody, but just one real quick example. I'll try to tell this quickly. So, we had a large telco customer who was totally built on a Red Hat infrastructure. It's actually in India. And that was before the acquisition. So fully built out on Red Hat. Now, right around the time of the acquisition, they had a catastrophic power outage that took down their data center. It blew out their backup power supplies. So data center went dark. When they brought it back up, the Red Hat infrastructure didn't attach appropriately to the storage. And so it was production systems. They were down for a day until we got all of that working. In the aftermath, doing the root cause analysis was after the acquisition. And so IBM was involved in it because it's also a big customer of IBM's. And the answer came down to the storage was misconfigured. Red Hat engineers had identified it and had told the client, hey, you need to rechange this. And it sent a couple of emails about it. Of course, but it obviously never happened. The IBM people were looking at the Red Hat people like, are you out of your mind? If you knew that was a problem, you fly there and make sure it happens. It's not good enough to say, here's what you need to do. You make sure it happens. And I do think that is just deep in IBM's culture, which is extraordinary. That and respect and reverence for extraordinary engineers, which is what allows us to do things like quantum and the advances that we've made around, anti-bias and AI, et cetera, et cetera. The issue, back to your point around, okay, so we have these wonderful attributes in IBM. I think the biggest issue with, not issue, but the biggest change we want to make to IBM's culture, I mentioned before, IBM has been very solutions oriented. And those are big, complex solutions, ERP systems, CRM systems that require really, really excellent execution, take variance out. I'd say back from my Delta days, it's like, turning an airplane and make sure you're running the safety procedures. There is no variance associated with that. You do those this way. And IBM has this deep heritage of doing that. When you're trying to innovate, though, you want to inject variance in. And when you want to say, we're not necessarily just doing it for our clients, we are working with our clients to build skill and capability with our clients, those are the changes we're working to make in the culture. So how do we drive a faster pace of innovation where it makes sense? Not on taking risk on your operational systems, but in your DevOps platform. And then how do we come in and not say, we'll do that for you, and say, hey, we're going to do this with you and build joint skills and create methodology to do that. So those are the culture changes we're making. The simple answer to how we're doing it, culture's an output. Not an input. Culture is an output of your management systems and your leadership behaviors. So we have laid out a set of traits around growth mindset, radical candor, inclusion that we are building into our culture, and the specific behaviors that leaders are following every day. So we're literally down to say, how do we groove things like being open to feedback, take that behaviors around that and groove those into habits? How do we groove creating space for debate to happen, into our management cadence and systems rather than kind of just performance readouts? So we're going through a whole set of things to our leadership style where we talk about identified behaviors and turning them into habits, and then specific changes to our management systems, which create the context for the culture change to happen. I hope some of our clients have already seen it, because we've done structural things like, roll out the IBM Garage methodology much more broadly already to our clients, which is a methodology of how we work together. So it's critical to our success. We are focused on it every day because culture begets capability, and capability to serve our clients better is what's going to allow us to be successful with the strategy.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think I love that example of like, don't just mail it in, get on the plane and show up, right? Be there in India as quickly as you can, because that's how we're going to be customer centric. So what a very wonderful visual, hopefully on a Delta airline to get there. Jim, the time went by too quickly. We could have continued down this topic. We are all out of time today. Thank you so much for leading the way at IBM. Thank you for your guidance and advice and sharing with our audience. We have a small token of appreciation for you for joining us today on the roundtable. We have planted the Jim Whitehurst Forest in the Great Lake St. Lawrence region in your honor. In your honor.
Wow.
Yeah. I know your personal commitment toward the environment. No, thank you. And IBM's commitment about being net zero emissions by 2030. So know that the Jim Whitehurst Forest is going to be doing its part to help the environment. Once we get out of COVID, we do have a climate crisis that we all need to be working towards.
Indeed. Well, I very much appreciate that. I did one of the first net zero programs at Delta many, many, many years ago where you could carbon neutralize your flights. I'm passionate about it, and I really do appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem at all. And for those of you who want to continue to follow and learn more about what Jim's thinking, his blog on LinkedIn is amazing. Subscribe to it. You're going to get some great insights of the world of business and leadership. So I'm a big fan. Jim, again, thank you so much for your time today. And for those of you, we would love for you to continue the conversation. Next month, we've got, again, Elevate's own and TD's own Claudette McGowan, the Global Executive Officer responsible for cybersecurity with IBM's own Chris Bontemps, joining us on April 20th. We'll send you out a link, but feel free to register at elevate.ca. There's no cost to do that. And again, we'll be monitoring social on Elevate Live if you've got any comments or questions that you'd like to share. And we believe at Elevate that feedback is a gift. We're going to be sending out a quick survey. It'll take you less than 2 minutes. Tell us what we're doing right. Tell us what we could do better. Tell us who you would love to see on this show. And for that, my name is Razor Suleiman. Everyone stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll see you next month on Elevate Main Stage.